Now on view at the Portland Art Museum, Paul McCartney Photographs, 1963 through 64, Eyes of the Storm, is an unprecedented exhibition that reveals extraordinary photographs taken by the beloved musical icon. Featuring recently rediscovered photos from Paul McCartney's personal archive, more than 250 pictures invite visitors to intimately experience the Beatles' meteoric rise from British sensation to international stardom. Curated by MPL and the National Portrait Gallery in London. Tickets and information at portlandartmuseum.org. Celebrate the best of our city's plant-based dining scene this Sunday at Circle V Portland. It's an all-inclusive walk-around tasting event featuring 10 chef collaborations from top vegan restaurants. So chefs from spots like Boxcar Pizza and Mama Doot, they'll be working together creating mashup dishes. Plus, there's going to be 14 beverage makers, even one of those giant grazing tables full of snacks. And the whole thing is a benefit for the nonprofits Growing Gardens and Urban Gleaners. It's all happening at Castaway Portland on September 22nd. Get your tickets today at circlevportland.com.
Over the past decade, scientists and activists have been sounding the alarm about a looming environmental disaster right in the heart of our city. The Critical Energy Infrastructure Hub, or CEI Hub, is where 90% of all of Oregon's liquid fuel is either stored or distributed from, and it just so happens to reside on wildly unstable land right by the Willamette River. So what happens not if, but when an earthquake hits? And what can we do now to avoid an environmental catastrophe? So today on CityCast Portland, science reporter Aaron Ross is here to walk us through what's at stake. It's Thursday, September 19th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. I've been looking forward to this conversation because I have a very vested interest in this topic, Aaron.
Because you live in St. John's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's right here. So tell us about the CEI Hub for those who don't live in St. John's or, alongside the river in this area. I just learned that it does hold 90% of our state's, not just Portland, our entire state's liquid fuel. So what is it doing here in Portland?
I didn't realize it was that much before I started on this story, by the way. The CEI Hub is that collection of tanks that you see right along the water if you're driving north along the Willamette, you're north of Portland heading to St. Helens, right? And I always thought there were 7 or 8 or 9 there. It didn't look like that many. There's over 600 tanks there. 90% of the gas goes through it. Some of it's stuff that's coming in on barges. Some of it comes in on pipelines. It gets sent to the rest of the state. It's 6 miles. This is 6 miles of land. So it's a lot of land.
Yeah, and can you explain what types of liquid fuel if people are just what, gas? Because when I heard about PDX's involvement, I was like, what?
Yeah, I also thought that this was just natural gas, and it's not. It's a little bit of everything. There's natural gas, there's gasoline for cars, there is jet fuel. All of the jet fuel for PDX is there, all of it. There's oil that's to be used. There's also slop oil, which is oil that's contaminated and been taken away from things, just sitting there. That's just waste. There's asphalt, almost any petroleum product. There's also biofuels like ethanol. It covers a lot.
What about extra virgin?
I don't think so.
Did you find that? No? Okay, great.
No.
All right. But you also mentioned pipeline, and that is really concerning to me because I didn't realize the extent of the pipeline. Could you explain what it entails?
Yeah, so there is more than one pipeline, but the big one is the Olympic pipeline, and it's a 400-mile system that goes from North Washington to Portland. So it's taking things all the way up to Seattle.
That's crazy.
Right, and that's something where in the event of an earthquake, and there's a lot of fault lines between here and Seattle, not just the big one.
Yeah.
That's an area where there can definitely be spills.
Is it under other bodies of water? Because, the reason why I was concerned is that it's underneath the Willamette. Does it also go to the Columbia? Where is it going, all the way up to northern Washington?
I have no idea. I have no idea if it goes into other bodies of water. But everything goes downhill, right? And everything goes down to the water, and it rains a lot here. So,
oh my gosh. And there are other pipes, like you said. That one's just the big one that like most people are very concerned about. But I'm assuming there's other pipes that are going places.
Yeah. And then there's also like the rail lines, right, coming in. So like train derailments are a huge issue. We've seen more of those in recent years, it feels like.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something that's gotten a lot of press, is like goods coming in on those trains.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't know is like when this stuff was built, it was built in a time when people just didn't know, right? Like it's not like it was built yesterday and everyone's like, oh yeah, the big one doesn't matter. Like this was built like how...
The average age of the tanks is 1954. Yeah, that's the average year that they were built. So they're very old and they're not robust. Like these aren't, it's not a terribly strong metal for a lot of them. It's pretty flimsy and prone to breakage in the right situations, which unfortunately we can make.
Let's do worst case scenarios because that just happens to be one of my favorite mind games for myself. So,
as someone who lives in St. John's, what's the worst thing that could possibly happen?
Yeah, well, here's the deal. This is why it's like so top of mind for me. It's because I can smell the CEI hub.
Really?
Like there is off-gassing and you can smell it. Okay, and it was way worse and now it's calmed down, but there was a period where I feel like every like late afternoon, especially if you drive through on is it St. Helens Road or whatever, you could totally smell it and it was frightening, you know?
Yeah,
that's
like, wild.
Yeah, I'm like, should we not smoke around here? Like what is going on? Like what? Yeah, it was gross. So the big one hits, worst case scenario, what's going to happen? Immediately, I know like those really old tanks are in the liquefaction zone.
Yeah, so liquefaction, for those who don't know, that is when you have kind of like a loose soil that is very saturated with water. And when you shake it, it starts to behave like a liquid. So like if you've ever like gone to the coast and kind of stood right by the water and like stomped your feet up and down and you start to sink, basically, it sort of makes quicksand. And so you get things that start to topple over. You get things that get like ripped apart. This is where a lot of the damage from earthquakes come. And it means this is like about the worst space you could possibly have these hubs. Like there's probably no worse place to build them in all of Portland than like on this water level landfill. The ground can also do this thing called lateral spreading, which is when it like kind of tears apart. And so things on top of it can also get torn apart.
Oh, wow.
And so like absolute worst case scenario, we're looking at an oil spill that's like in the hundreds of millions, almost 200 million gallons. It's a really scary situation.
And is this also taking in consideration the broken pipelines, not just the CEI tanks?
No, it isn't. It's not.
So we're just talking about the tanks themselves. That's like 200 million, right?
Yes.
And then we think about like the actual pipelines underneath. Possibly even the barges coming through.
Yeah.
To me, I'm just like, Portland's done at that point. Like, it doesn't seem like anyone's going to leave unscathed. And I don't mean like, oh, you're on fire, but just like, you're going to get cancer. Like we're all going to get cancer.
Well, and like before we even start to think about people, right? Like it's bad enough when like an oil spill like this happens and there isn't also a massive natural disaster that's taking all of your resources. But like cleanup is not going to start right away. This is the sort of thing that it takes place a really, really, really long time to recover from. And that's like before you even start to think about like what does it mean to be a human being living there?
Yeah.
But yeah, so people, right?
Yeah.
So worst case scenario for people in the area. Like one issue is like in the immediate aftermath, there is a high probability of explosions. So people who are working there, not to be like very morbid, but like almost certain death. Like if there are explosions and you are working there, you are in very big trouble. You have fires. So a lot of these things are very, very flammable. Fires can be started by like power lines falling onto there's a lot of power lines in the area, or they can be started by just like the metal on metal causing sparks. So there's a very high likelihood of fire. And then you have like from all of these chemicals burning, you have gases that are coming off, like the off-gassing that you're experiencing. And if the wind is right, then you have very dangerous chemicals coming both a short distance and a farther distance. And again, like really depends on the direction of the wind, how strong the wind is, where it would go. But there's potential for a lot of bad there too.
Can I add just more doom and gloom depending on the season? Forest Park is right there, and they do have a clearing for that hub, but it's not enough.
Yeah, they really expect high levels of wildfires, and like people who live up in that area
it'll hit over to Northwest. Like what I'm saying is, because I think a lot of people also, when they're like CEI hub, they're like, oh, that area is like, no, we're very much connected to the rest of Portland. Like if the fires catch on to Forest Park, that's Northwest, easily goes down to Southwest. We're now in Beaverton. Like in my head, I'm just like, we're just moving on,
Yeah, and like especially in the immediate Forest Park area, right? You don't have a lot of roads that go in. The roads that go in have things like gates in the way that those can pose an issue for people trying to get in and out if they're evacuating. So there's not a lot of ways in and out, which also means that there's not a lot of ways for like fire crews to get in. And that's assuming that the roads are passable at all. So it becomes a very dangerous situation very quickly if this happens in the summertime, which for all of the other Cascadia things that can happen, you're like, okay, you want summer, right? Because there's less water in the ground, the soil's less saturated, you have less building damage. But when it comes to fires, like you kind of want wintertime.
All right, well, let's take a quick break here. And when we come back, does our city have a plan if the CEI hub were to blow up tomorrow?
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Your business deploys AI pilots everywhere. But are they going anywhere? Or are they stuck in silos, exhausting resources, unable to scale? Maybe you don't need hundreds of AI pilots. You need a holistic strategy. IBM has 65,000 consultants with Gen AI expertise who can help you design, integrate, and optimize AI solutions. So you're not just deploying AI, you're scaling it across your business. Learn more at ibm.com/consulting. IBM. Let's create.
So what's our city's plan? Say this happens, tomorrow. What is their emergency response?
It's very, very neighborhood based.
Oh, no.
Because this is really going to be like, you're very much on your own. There's really not a lot that can get to where you are. Yeah. When I was discussing this, it just kind of came back to like, you really want to connect with your neighborhood emergency team. Your local net, they're going to know where things like food caches are. They're going to know how to get you like first aid and emergency services. Expect several days at least to even get like the main most important roads going back up. So to get people in and out, to get people to be able to clean this up, to get first aid, any of those things. So like when they say for Cascadia to be prepared for 14 days, like they really, really do mean 14 days. And then like some areas will be more prioritized than others for things like recovery, especially like if there's a massive, say, like spill of organic volatile compounds. But I think the most important thing that like an individual can do to be ready is just to have a plan. Like think about when you were like a kid and you had to make those like house fire plans. You had like the corner that you'd meet up at. Like make those plans for an earthquake, especially if you live in that area and you might need to evacuate.
Is there anything else other than water that I'm going to need? Do you have any ideas for like masks? Like,
yes.
Because it's not just like, again, it's not just St. John's. It's literally like if you live in the Northwest Hills, North Portland, basically.
I mean, when it comes to like off-gassing, honestly, it can be all of Portland. Like this is good advice for everyone to take. There's tons of different models available that show where things like volatile gases could spread, where like ash from fires could spread. And it really is the whole area, and it could be beyond the area depending on the wind. Like this stuff can spread very, very far. But yes, so masks, your trusty N95 is gonna do a lot for you. It's not gonna do everything. It will get some gases, not all of them. It will get a lot of the PM 2.5, the particulate matter, which is important and is very dangerous. You can get those big like shop masks that like cover your whole face that you put different cartridges in. And then for that, you want the cartridges that are rated for organic compounds. Really what you're going to focus on is just like filtering out immediate smoke. And if your home is viable, having like a room that you can kind of like hang out in is going to be a good thing. Like anything that can just be like a barrier between you and what's circulating. Because one piece of good news is that like the most volatile compounds evaporate fast. Like this is a quick short-term issue, and then it's an issue for like people who are working cleaning it up because they'll be getting VOCs off of the spill.
Okay, well, all the doom and gloom, let's talk about what is actually being done. So there are a number of grassroots activist groups and even politicians organizing right now to address the CEI hub. And we spoke to one of the leaders of the CEI hub task force, Nikki Mandel, and they mentioned that so much of the work has been led by the Linton Neighborhood Association. Like you mentioned, these neighborhoods are taking it upon themselves. Can you explain why Linton is leading this effort?
Because Linton is going to get hit the hardest. There's no way in and there's no way out, essentially. Like, they're the closest to the hub. And if things go wrong, like, there's not a lot of roads in that area. And those roads will probably be damaged and they'll probably take some time to get rebuilt. So, like, ultimately, the thing that's going to keep people the safest is prevention, right? Not response. And so, like, they work hard to advocate for prevention.
Right. All right. Well, let's talk about Zenith. That's a Texas-based fossil fuel company. The reason I want to talk about it is because I feel like out of all the dozen or so companies that make up the CEI hub, the one that we hear the most from that area is Zenith. Like,
Yes.
everyone's just Zenith. Like, why is that?
Yeah, we've seen Zenith in terms of like the Stop Climate Change or like the climate change protests and things like that. And it's because Zenith has butted heads with regulations pretty often. So like their air quality permit is expired. They're one of the largest operators. And what goes through their infrastructure isn't staying in Oregon. We're just like a stop on the way to everywhere else that they are moving their products.
So, like, basically, they're putting us at risk and not giving anything in return.
Essentially, yes. Yes.
Wow. Okay, so that makes sense. Is the state, is the city, is the county, is anyone at all responding?
Yes, and this is where the good news is, because I think government tends to move at a glacial pace, and I think this is one area where like it's actually kind of operating quickly and like even on time. So on the state level, there is SB 1567, which was passed in 2022. And the end goal is to basically fix the CEI hub, right? To prevent, not respond. So this bill was passed in 2022, and it required relatively quickly for all of the companies to complete a seismic vulnerability assessment. And those were due June 30th of this year. And every single one of the companies met that deadline, which is pretty impressive when you compare it to like some of the other environmental remediation things we've had going on. And the next step is that they have 180 days to come up with their like mitigation plan. And PDX has already submitted that. That's being reviewed by the DEQ. And then once that is reviewed, they can start replacing their tanks.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know of anything going on in the city level. Have you heard of anything?
I've heard a little bit on the county level. I know that Sharon Mirren's been pretty involved in sponsoring a bill that would basically like create what are called like risk bonds in Multnomah County. Have you heard anything about those?
To be honest, I don't quite understand the full breadth of what they mean. I just know like she's trying to make it so the companies are demonstrating like financial capacity to cover potential risks and liabilities associated with their operations. So essentially, they would be the ones financially to dig us out of the hole they blew us up in.
Yeah, and sort of the way that it works is that they're kind of paying up front, right? So like the idea is that like they're making, the goal of the bonds is to make like mitigation valuable, so that it costs you more money up front. Like cutting corners up front and being like, well, we'll pay for that down the line. They're trying to make it so that's more expensive than just doing it all right the first time.
So then right at the start, they're encouraging companies to not only mitigate the risk of operations because of how risky everything is, but also I think the way it's being framed is that it's going to either discourage more companies from trying to be part of this hub, or it's going to hopefully shut some of these companies down in our area. That's, I think, the aim, but I don't understand why the city can't just be like, we're not doing business with you. Or like, hey, pay up for us moving this shit over. It can't be here anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, this is great. I'm glad somebody's doing something, but it feels a little passive aggressive in a sense. When I'm just like, can someone just be direct with these fucking companies and just be like, hey man, can you not blow us up?
This is getting like way, way, way out of my understanding of politics, state and local government, but I'm sure there's some sort of like bureaucratic reason that it has to go through regulations first, but it doesn't really feel terribly efficient to me.
But I mean, props to County Commissioner Sharon Mirren for even sponsoring a bill that's like doing anything.
Yeah,
you know?
And it'll be read in November, yeah.
And I know she won't be part of that commission anymore, so I hope somebody continues this. I don't know.
If you're listening.
Yeah, I feel like this is the kind of thing that Portland will continue to ignore until people like us, the people who live here, do something drastic.
Yeah. And
do you know what I mean? Like that is when Portland's going to be like, oh, so this is more important right now?
Yeah. And
like, of course we need natural gas. Of course the airplanes need jet fuel. Does it need to be on quicksand near the Willamette River? Does it need to be there?
Well, and this is another thing, right? We talk about natural gas a lot when we're talking about disaster prep because we're thinking about resilience. And like, for example, if this comes in the winter, right, and an earthquake takes the grid down, then people don't have heat. Mm-hmm. Now, there are ways to heat your home with natural gas even when the power is out. But if, say, the hub that 90% of the state's natural gas goes through is out, how do you heat your homes? Mm-hmm. You don't have electric, you don't have that either, right?
And most modern furnaces, honestly, you can't bypass the electric
exactly.
safety. So no matter what, you're screwed unless you have a fireplace, you know?
And if there's an earthquake, you want to turn off your natural gas quickly anyway in case there's a leak. So, yeah. But then like if you're somewhere, say in Bend, where you don't have an earthquake, like what do you do if the natural gas isn't getting there? So the state in 2017 made what's called the Fuel Action Plan. And it's basically a plan for like, if this goes out, how do you get fuel to the rest of the state? I mean, how are you like fueling your emergency vehicles, for example, if the gasoline comes through here and the oil comes through here, right? It's not just natural gas. Like, how are you fueling your airplanes if the jet fuel is all stored there? And so there's like plans to try and like move some of this to other areas. So like flying fuel into and out of Redmond, but then like they're probably not going to be moving a lot of it over the Cascades. Like you start working on the east side in the Klamath area, like what do you do?
Maybe not on a fault.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And somewhere not near water. And I feel like between those two guiding points, like we are able to figure something out.
You know, you would think this, right? Because I was thinking about this and I'm like, well, Redmond doesn't shake. You're not immediately near water. And then I think about how there was a major fire that like came very, very, very close to Redmond this summer, like close enough that the Redmond airport triggered evacuations in Redmond proper. And like, so the part that doesn't shake is fire territory. It gets tricky everywhere.
I just feel like we need to start talking about this. That's all.
Yeah,
because the fact that we are literally putting all of our eggs in this one basket is pretty silly.
This is something that freaked me out, like when I thought that there were like 10 tanks. And then, you learn the sheer, like the scope of this, the massive environmental impacts. And the scale goes way beyond the immediate area. But even the immediate area is pretty big.
Well, Erin, thank you so much for hanging out, bumming us all out.
Yeah, I'm going to go watch something fun today. I don't know what, but something uplifting. Any suggestions?
Just cartoons. This is what, it's like we just watched a really scary movie, and I'm just like, we should just watch Adventure Time now.
Yeah. Apparently I've been sleeping on Bluey. Maybe now's the time.
Bluey is wonderful.
I've heard.
I highly suggest just getting into Bluey. But also that pit of like anger, possible resentment for our city government and that you have, our city and state government. Yeah, maybe we should do something with that.
Yeah. Motivate.
That's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend, rate or leave us a review. It really does help us out. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you with Slim.